Hello, welcome back to another Hardware News Recap of the Week. In this one, I'll be ranting about mythological and D&D creature names as it pertains to computer hardware. It's very important. It's been a big problem in this industry, and we finally had enough. We'll also be talking about Intel. Speaking of big problems in the industry, this would be in response to the ongoing instability issues that have really built up over the last month in particular. Additionally, we'll be talking about Sony and how it says it's still learning, even though it's been in this industry for video games for like half a century or something, depending on how you count it, or at least decades, and its response to the Helldivers 2 issues that it caused. Let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by Montech and the King 95 Pro case. The King 95 Pro is a dual chamber enclosure with configurable options for storage and power supplies. Could be useful for a Threadripper system, and ample radiator and fan mounting options scattered around the top, back, bottom, side, and front of the case. The front also can be mesh or solid, with the mesh running a higher porosity for more breathability. Learn more at the link in the description below. Up first, we're shooting the third version of this story about Intel's motherboard and CPU power problems because it keeps changing. So I think as soon as we finish this episode, we're gonna kind of, here you go, get it out the door because they might change it again. Intel's CPU and motherboard situation is a complete cluster F-SKU at this point, and at the center of all of it is a problem that has now existed for 8 years from Intel, at least, since Coffee Lake, maybe before then, where it acts the perpetual victim of Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte, as it seems to insist Intel has absolutely no control over the power behavior out of the box that motherboard vendors enforce on Intel CPUs, even though Intel, in fact, controls the entire ecosystem start to finish. So, at this point, given the stability problems we have all seen, the chickens have hatched before the egg in front of the cart. I think that's how the saying goes. And Intel has finally had more problems than just thermal ones with CPUs. After some rumors earlier this week about a potential change to PL1 and PL2, which stated that they functionally would have the power and significantly harm performance, Intel decided to put out a formal statement instead. The company said this, quote, "Several motherboard manufacturers have released BIOS profiles labeled Intel Baseline Profile. However, these BIOS profiles are not the same as the Intel default settings recommendations that Intel has recently shared with its partners regarding the instability issues reported on 13th and 14th gen K-SKU processors. These Intel baseline profile BIOS settings appear to be based on power delivery guidance previously provided by Intel to manufacturers, describing the various power delivery options for 13th and 14th generation K-SKU processors based on motherboard capabilities. In all bold, Intel is not recommending motherboard manufacturers to use baseline power delivery settings on boards capable of higher values." They continued, with Intel's recommended Intel default settings are a combination of thermal and power delivery features along with a selection of possible power delivery profiles based on motherboard capabilities. Intel recommends customers implement the highest power delivery profile compatible with each individual motherboard design, as noted in this table. And this is the table they included. So this image doesn't list any baseline settings. Instead, it lists performance and extreme, PL1 through 4, and some other settings. The bigger news here, reading between the lines, that Intel's basically saying, hey, we're not enforcing this whole 125 watt PL1, 188 watt PL2 thing that you all have been talking about. So that seems, at least that's our takeaway from it. Which is maybe more of a response to earlier stories this week than it is useful in any other way. It seems like Intel at this point is just trying to get in front of that part of the story, which we'll see what they do over the next month because it was we'll see. The problem that Intel faces is if they change things too much, they have a bait and switch where they've drastically impacted performance potentially, or even a little bit, in exchange for getting stability. If it's not stable at baseline setting, sorry, I can't use that word anymore. They've changed the definition for that too. If it's not stable in the socket, out of the box, with whatever settings are applied, then it's not really fair to count that performance as the sort of usable performance of the product. So they're trying to avoid a situation where they get caught in a bait and switch, but also trying to improve the stability. So that's where Intel is right now. What it is saying explicitly is that it doesn't recommend using lower settings than a board can handle, which is kind of what got them into this situation to begin with, although technically they're referencing these settings now. it's also suggesting explicitly that customers use the highest profile. That's what they're saying. So unfortunately, this is the exact behavior that caused this whole mess to begin with. And even still, motherboard vendors have deviated from Intel's table that they've just provided because that's what they do, because Intel doesn't actually try to control anything. They just say, out of our hands, we're just poor old little Intel. We can't stop them from setting crazy settings that are unstable or, in the very least, are impossible to cool. That's not us. Intel has created the entirety of the situation from start to finish, the way they handle their partners and the way they handle their power settings, where Intel's desperation to continue to blast performance by just increasing the frequency and the power over the last several generations has caught up to them. And that's why we have these stability problems now, and it's also why this is a complete mess over the past week. I was trying to calculate how many more times can I swear in this episode. Complete mess for this past week, because it seems like nobody knows what's going on, and Intel is the one that needs to step in and be the leader of its own ecosystem here and say, here's what we're doing. Everybody do this now. But that's not what's, well, at least based on this today, it doesn't seem like that's what's happening, at least not in a strong enough way to really fully resolve things. So in other words, there's really not much news. All this does is kind of refute parts of some of the major previous commentary, and we've now shot this 3 times, and at the end of it all, really it does seem like it's just a clown car full of Intel CPUs that are being driven by the motherboards, except the Intel CPUs in the car are the only ones with a driver's license. So I don't know if that makes any sense. That's what we're gonna go with for the descriptor of the problem. Let's move on to the next story. I don't want to film this again. The next one's going to be Sony. We'll just get these out of the way first. Sony had some Helldivers 2 problems. The end of this, I've got quite a few opinions on what's going on, but just for the news and the facts up front. So Helldivers 2 developers Arrowhead last week and the game's player base were put through a turmoil by Evil Empire Sony, and that's the game's publisher. So Sony published a mandate that all PC players would have to link PlayStation Network or PSN accounts to their Steam account in order to continue playing. The original Steam post, now updated, stated that the requirement had been made, quote, temporarily optional due to technical issues at the explosively popular launch of the game, but that the grace period, they said, would expire. Sony said this: account linking plays a critical role in protecting our players and upholding the values of safety and security provided on PlayStation and PlayStation Studios games. Now, as you all know, this directly basically states that being on Sony's network instantly makes you safe, and that's why there's an entire website devoted to security breaches and vulnerabilities. It's October 2023 breach of employee personal information, for example, or it's September 1 in 2023 of 260 gigabytes of files. It's August 2017 breach of Sony social media accounts and various others. So they have experience in security. Sony also said this, quote, as such, as of May 6th, all new Helldivers 2 players on Steam will be required to connect their Steam account to a PlayStation Network account. Current players on Steam will start to see the mandatory login from May 30th and will be required to have linked a Steam and PlayStation Network account by June 4th. PlayStation Network accounts are free and easy to set up. Asterisk, unless you literally can't set them up. Come back to that. We understand that while this may be an inconvenience to some of you, this step will help us to continue to build a community that you all are proud to be a part of. Many thanks for your continued support of Helldivers 2. Signed, Sony Interactive Entertainment. There's a trend between this story and the first one. There's a few problems with this, but right off the bat, it is incredibly scummy to change like this after the launch of the product, because it now no longer functions the same way. Now, if you think, well, making an account, no big deal. First of all, say that to all the GeForce Experience users who've complained about it for years. They finally are pulling that back. But secondly, in some regions and countries, it is actually not possible to comply with the terms of service of this network and make an account for it. So they've set up an unwinnable scenario for a lot of users that this has all been changed now. But that's why a lot of people were so upset about it. So we just think it's not right to change a behavior that will actually take away access to the product or significantly alter it in a meaningful way after the customer has not only bought it, but invested significant time in it which puts them in a situation they may have to compromise on other values they care about in order to keep using that product. And so that's kind of our problem with it. Now, even though the PSN integration was technically there from the start and technically mentioned on the Steam page, it was easily bypassed and it had no impact on user experience. One of our staff members got the game at launch and just skipped it and never thought about it again until now. In fact, the mandatory account link was requested by Sony 6 months ahead of launch, according to developer Arrowhead's CEO, and it was his decision to suspend the requirement a few hours after launch. More seriously, PSN isn't even available in a whole host of countries. Players in those regions would be forced to never play the game again, even though they bought it and played it for months, or lie about the location and break the TOS and see where that gets them if it's ever a problem. It's one thing to bar some regions in the first place due to trade restrictions or simple unwillingness to do business with those markets, but to take it away after the sale has been made is absolutely disgusting, in my opinion, tantamount to theft. So entering some light speculation here, we assume what happened is that Sony thought it would look great to pump the numbers of PSN signups leading into a fiscal quarter or a filing or something, whatever. I mean, I don't know. It's money driven because Sony went into this calculated. They would have known, or if they didn't, they're unbelievably incompetent. I don't think they're that stupid. They would have known there would be pushback. They would have known there'd be a loss of some players who can't meet that requirement legitimately, and they chose to forge ahead anyway. And the only reason I personally can think of for a large company like Sony to do that is money. And so the only reason they would walk that back is money. So anyway, the game's player base immediately went into a complete frenzy and enacted a fourth wall breaking major order of their own and started review bombing on Steam with over 200,000 negative reviews. And Arrowhead CEO chimed in with support, but also just looked utterly defeated. It was genuinely sad to read some of the response from the CEO. I mean, to be frank, like some of the Twitter posts from the CEO, you read it and you're like, I think I have identified depression. Like, I think that's what this is. And it kind of paints that picture of like this powerlessness despite a prior potential business agreement. And it's because of how much the game completely flipped from this absolute positive win in recent weeks to what it was. He tweeted this: "Is this the moment to tweet what? You guys don't have phones?" Some good humor at least. On a serious note, we are talking solutions with PlayStation, especially for non-PSN countries. Your voice has been heard, and I'm doing everything I can to speak for the community, but I don't have the final say. Now, it's important for everyone here to bear in mind that the contract between Arrowhead and Sony, like we said, for Helldivers 2 was made years ago. Generally speaking, the publisher is the party that controls distribution. That's the whole point of having a publisher. Now, unfortunately, there was some collateral damage here where the original Helldivers game, which has nothing to do with this situation, was also caught up in review bombing. The change came in on Friday. By Monday, Sony spoke up and posted to Twitter or X, and the original Steam post was updated. Quote, "Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. We're still," let's try that again, "we're still learning. We're still learning." Oh, poor Sony. They're just learning. They're just figuring it out. They're new to this. Cut them some slack. They're still learning. That makes it okay. What is best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for your continued support of Helldivers 2, and we'll keep you updated on future plans. So number one, they reversed the decision. That's good. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. Number two, Sony can back off with the "we're still learning" absolute nonsense, because the company was founded 77 years ago. It was founded like World War II era. 1946, I think, is what we saw for the original company founding date. And even if you want to focus only on PlayStation, 1994, December 94. And that is enough time on its own to no longer be still learning. If you're still learning about things as basic as, gee, do you think the customers would be mad if we broke the game for some of them. After 30 years in business, then I really don't know what to say. Like, yes, everybody is constantly learning, hopefully. That's kind of the plan. This is like learning how to breathe when you've been alive for 30 plus years in just PlayStation alone. It's just bullshit. It's nonsense. It is an appeal to this sort of sense of empathy for a gigantic company that is worth, by market cap, over $100 billion. Playing to the pity me, we're learning approach. I obviously found it very frustrating because it's like just post and say, whoa, we screwed that up. Sorry, we're reverting it immediately and we won't do it again. Like that's really all that needed to be said. So anyway, Helldivers 2 is probably the worst game Sony could have chosen this for. It's been, the players have spent months banding together to achieve things in-game for community-wide goals. So they basically chose a community that has structured itself on working together to combat large alien, well, maybe not the alien part, but to combat large, strange creatures. At least everyone's probably going to get a cool cape out of it now, so that's good. Let's move on to the D&D and mythology stuff. Sparkle announced its new Intel Arc Rock cards this past week, following up its Elf, Orc, and Titan lineup. And there was a comment that really grinds my gears with this one, where someone said Sparkle is just copying the Asus ROG by changing the G in ROG to C in ROC. And first of all, nerds, the rock is a mythological bird. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Asus Republic of Gamers. And we've actually spoken in the past about how Sparkle's entire naming scheme is flawed because it ranks orcs as hierarchically better than elves. But as we all know, the only actual meaningful difference between them comes at character creation, where on page 16 of Player's Handbook 1, edition 3.5, we can see that elves have a natural +2 modifier to dexterity, a -2 to constitution, but they have a wide, diverse range of weapon proficiency, and orcs don't even appear in the Player's Handbook version 1, 3.5. In fact, the closest thing we get to is half-orcs. On pages 18 and 19, where we see a +2 strength and not just 1, but 2 negative offsets to int and charisma. For a true full orc, we have to turn to page 203 of the Monster Manual 1, edition 3.5 to find the elevated strength and fortitude. However, neither dexterity nor strength is inherently superior to the other. But given that Sparkle's hierarchy clearly ranks strength as the most important because the orc is higher than the elf, it follows that the Titan is its best in class. The company is now introducing the Rock, which is the well-known, of course, well-documented legendary bird of prey found in Sinbad the Sailor and thought to have originated from the Malagasy crowned eagle. Now, despite the Malagasy crowned eagle coming from Madagascar, another potential origin of the Rock is actually from the Epiornis elephant bird eggs. The Rock has extremely mixed documentation between source material in both Dungeons & Dragons and Heroes of Might and Magic. However, relying on the 1999 original release edition of Heroes of Might and Magic 3, we know that the Rock is actually a Stronghold Tier 5 creature. It costs 600 gold, it has an upgrade to Thunderbirds, and Shiva gives it a +1 attack for every level after the 5th hero level. Now, clearly, this has absolutely nothing to do with Asus Republic of Gamers. The ROG doesn't have anything to do with the ROC. Sparkle did not copy ROG and change a letter, they based it on this bird. Also, the video card's gonna ship in white. Don't ever talk to me or my Monster Manual again. Oh, and while we're here, I'm actually making a tabletop product for the GN store. No, I'm not joking, like for real. Played a lot of tabletop games for a very long time. Wanted to make something. It's super cool. It is tech themed, and I can't say much more than that. It is coming out probably somewhere in the November area. So we're not ready to say what it is yet, but we've invested a ton of time and resources into making something stupid cool. So I'm excited about it, but we'll talk about that more later. Okay, up next, a new cute pet video card of sorts. Video Cards posted this. They ran a story about a board partner called ASL. If I've heard of them before, I didn't remember them. So ASL is a China-based board partner, and they have an almost Yeston-inspired video card featuring a cat and dog decal on the fans, a custom backplate that says Wuhuan the cat, and its partner in crime, Baja Hey. We're gonna go with the dog. I'm actually not sure the characters for that one, but we're not familiar with this IP. Either way, though, we've said a number of times in the past that unique PC parts are always worth the time and coverage as long as they hit that base requirement of still being functional, because adding some diversity of design to the market really keeps things fresh and fun. from the regular sort of black and RGB styling we get. As long as the card achieves that base functionality of keeping relatively cool and hitting the expected performance, different styles really add more fun to the builds. This is $340. It is an RTX 4060. We didn't see any in the US, but they were on AliExpress briefly. Up next, Blackwell is expected to significantly boost TSMC's production and demand, as you'd expect. So yet another story highlighting NVIDIA's dominance in the AI hardware market, intelligence firm TrendForce has published a new write-up that notes high supply chain expectations out of NVIDIA's upcoming Blackwell platform. This is the one that is sort of replacing H100 as we understand it, they're going to be selling alongside each other for a period, but that's the newest one. So the GB200 is the one that is of note here, and TrendForce says, quote, shipments could exceed millions of units by 2025, potentially making up nearly 40 to 50% of NVIDIA's high-end GPU market, which is insane if that's actually how it's going to pan out. Now, this is in stark contrast to predecessor GH200, which according to TrendForce, quote, accounted for approximately 5% of NVIDIA's high-end GPU shipments, so a huge change. To us, this might mean that there's just a lot of pent-up demand from customers, especially enterprise, of course, who were in the wings waiting for the next generation. It's just like in consumer hardware, when if you know there's something new right around the corner, it feels kind of bad to buy the current one unless it's at a steep discount or something. And that behavior definitely would extend to enterprise as well, although enterprise might be more willing to just keep things going and buy whatever's available, depending on how large they are. We would think, though, that some of that demand is why we're seeing this action now. And either way, the market intelligence provider said that Blackwell is expected to boost TSMC's CoWoS total capacity by, quote, over 150% in 2024. So CoWoS stands for chip on wafer on substrate. So NVIDIA's GB200 and B100 chips are expected to launch later this year. They're not fully out yet. And TrendForce anticipates that they, quote, will not see significant production volumes until fourth quarter 24 or first quarter 25. Story elaborates that, quote, the inclusion of GB200, B100, and B200 in NVIDIA's B series will boost demand for CoWoS capacity, leading TSMC to raise its total CoWoS capacity needs for 2024. The estimated monthly capacity by the end of the year is expected to reach nearly 40K, and they say that's a 150% year-over-year increase. And in terms of how much of TSMC's fab capabilities for that technology NVIDIA specifically would occupy, the current expectation from what TrendForce is saying is it could be more than half, which is absolutely insane. NVIDIA is a monster right now. It's crazy how gargantuan it's gotten. Next one, Microsoft is experimenting with ads in Windows 11. So the company rolled out its Windows 11 Insider Preview build 22635.3495, which is our next monitor name, and that's now in the beta channel. Microsoft writes, we are now trying recommendations to help you discover great apps from the Microsoft Store under recommended on the start menu. Microsoft has obviously fallen on hard times. For example, it recently became the world's most valuable company with a market cap of $3.06 trillion, but it's not the universe's most valuable company, as far as we know. And they've fallen on hard times. They need this. Unfortunately, the company says you can disable the ads by going to Settings, Personalization, Start, and turning off the toggle for show recommendations for tips, app promotions, and more. The company's blog also posts out that these ads, quote, will not apply to commercial devices. And finally, the post also states, we regularly try out new experiences and concepts that may never get released with Windows Insiders to get feedback. Now, we were able to, once again, obtain a tape of the, why did I say tape? We're gonna go with it. We once again obtained a tape of a Microsoft board meeting. Here's how it went.
We estimate we can sell up to 80% of an individual's visual field before inducing seizures.
Up next is a fun story about an educational engineering project someone took on. We always like reporting on these. So this one really draws attention to itself because it's an Etch-A-Sketch computer, sort of. It features a Raspberry Pi. This was made by modder Micah Tilton. And Tilton installed a stepper motor to control the Etch-A-Sketch's knobs using a 3D printed adapter that he designed alongside a base plate that incorporates screws to hold the stepper motors in place. To get the pieces rolling, he had to measure the Etch-A-Sketch's screen, which measured 153 by 107 millimeters. And in case you ever wanted to know what the resolution of an Etch-A-Sketch's screen is, with a line width that measures approximately 0.5 millimeter, it features 306 by 214 pixels. Can't wait to use DLSS on that. It'll be 4K. From there, Tilton used pathfinding algorithms to trace paths that connect clusters and to backtrack every time the Etch-A-Sketch hits a dead end. He then converted those path instructions into something the motors could follow to draw images on the Etch-A-Sketch. Analyzing the Etch-A-Sketch, which is a sentence I didn't think I'd say, he noticed that it took roughly 4 1/4 turns of the left dial to span the length of the Etch-A-Sketch and about 3 turns to go from top to bottom, as a quote from the content. Translating this to the motors, he noted that, quote, the stepper motor takes 200 pulses of electricity, or steps, to make 1 full rotation, which equates 850 steps horizontally and 600 vertically. He then used the formula to convert the pixel coordinates of the image and ultimately save the instructions out to a simple text file. And there's actually, you look at this image of a dog. Tilton said that it took his Robo Etch-A-Sketch roughly 2 minutes to finish, noting that the motors got hot and produced a lot of noise in the process. Now we know his artwork is a bit sketchy, but he likes to shake things up. That's it for this news. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to grab one of these copper-plated stainless steel mule mugs that we posted on the store with a nice thermal conductivity formula on it. Again, depending on the temperature at which the test is done, the thickness, and you get the idea. But it's up there for a nerdy representation of something we talk about all the time, which is effectively heat transfer. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.